Hi guys, I'm Woodcraft Hamster and I thought I'd do our final episode of making our Applewood bowl for you today. So this is the bowl. It's been about a week's worth of sanding and as I've said before, I absolutely despise it with a passion. So I've just been doing sort of 10-15 minutes here and there. It's all been sanded down to a 320 grit finish, which is a nice smooth finish for a piece of wood like this. There's a few little tool marks still in the bowl. Very deep ones. You can't actually feel them, but they are still visible, and to be honest I just didn't have the patience to carry on with them, but it's all feeling and looking quite nice, and what I'm going to do today is just the final finishing. Now it's my standard fare. It's going to be the use of oil to give it a nice protective coating, and then we're going to use a little bit of oil and beeswax in combination just to give it a final finish. So what I think I'll do, I'll bring the camera just a little bit closer in and I'll show you what it is we're going to do. Right then guys, so here we have our materials, and I apologise in advance if the sound quality is not great. It's quite windy out today, but what I've got is just an old washed out tuna tin. And the oil I'm using today is this, which is almond oil. Now hopefully you can see there in the bottle, it's quite a light oil, and obviously apple is quite a light wood, very similar to birch in that respect, and I tend to find that a very light oil works better with light wood unless you want to have a particularly dark finish. So I'm just going to fill this up about a third of the way with oil. Now there's two ways you can do this. You can either warm this up in an oven. Now I've had several bowls, even though they've felt perfectly dry, I've had them split on me when warming up in the oven, so I'm not going to risk it with this one, and instead I'm going to heat up the oil itself. So if I just get my little stove going here, and you can do this on a hob, or wherever you want to do it. And I'm just going to use a pair of grips. As you can see, I've folded the back of this tin down just to give me a good grip. You can use a pot holder or whatever you want to use. And we just want to warm this oil up. Certainly not till it's boiling or anything like that, but just so it's warm enough that it will help penetrate into the bowl. Now while I'm doing this, obviously I've got a little block of beeswax just here, that we will be using after we've done the original oil coating. And putting this oil on, putting the warm oil on this, what it will do is it will help the oil penetrate into the bowl, and just give that a much better finish. Now that oil has turned very liquidy, and all I'm going to do is pour maybe half of it into the bowl itself. I can put that down to rest, and just taking a piece of clean cloth, and I have cleaned the bowl earlier today as well just to get all the final sanding residue off, and just using this I'm just going to run this oil around the inside of the bowl. Actually that oil is quite warm, it's almost burning my fingers, and you just want to make sure that everything gets a good even coating. Now I normally start off inside the bowl because it makes a very good receptacle to keep your oil from running all over the place, and then you can sort of get round to all these little side bits here, get into all your little nooks and crannies, start going around the outside of the bowl. Now you're going to get smothered in oil doing this, so I'd recommend making sure you've got a piece of rag or something handy just to clean your hands off, but with the residue of the oil that was in that bowl, I can pretty much coat the entire thing. Just make sure I'm getting all these bits here. And make sure you get the underside of your handles as well. And what I'm going to do, once this is all filled in, I'm going to give this probably 10 minutes or so just for the oil to set in. And you want the reason, as I say, that we heat it is so that it will get sucked up slightly quicker into the wood. I mean, it's already, certainly in my opinion, I'll let you guys be the judge, but we've already got a really nice looking finish. Now obviously as this dries out, I do like this high sheen, but as the oil soaks into the wood we're going to lose this glossiness, which is basically why we're going to move over and put some beeswax on it as well. But that's now completely coated. We've got all of the little bits and pieces, and I'm just going to leave this to soak in for probably, as I say, about 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll come back once it's soaked in and I'll show you what the next step is. Right then guys, so this is the finished bowl. I've left the oil on for probably about half an hour, and I've just wiped off all of the excess residue. And it's starting to look pretty nice. I mean, this actually would be okay as it is. I could give it another coats of oil just to help that sort of penetrate in there, but what I'm going to do instead, as I say, is putting a little bit of my oil and beeswax finish. Now inside this container, hopefully you can just see there, I've got probably about half of the block of beeswax that I showed you earlier, and in order to help this melt, I've just kind of shaved it down into very fine shavings, and that will just help it melt down a little bit quicker. Like so. So I'm just going to melt this down very quickly, and when you're making this, you generally want to use more oil than you use beeswax. It's probably a ratio of about 1/3 beeswax to 2/3 oil at this stage. You can play around with that, and I generally just play about with it every time that I make this, just to get the right consistency. If you use too much wax, which is not a problem, you can use as much or as little as you like, but if you do use too much, what will happen is it will solidify very quickly, which will essentially mean that you have it's very difficult to work with. Now you want to allow it to cool down just a little bit. Now that oil actually looks warm enough now, it's just melting the last few remnants of the wax, so I can put the stove out of the way. And in order to apply this, what you want to use is just a piece of clean cloth. This is a piece of a cotton napkin that I think I filched from somewhere, I have no idea where. You know, yes, you do get little threads and things coming off. It's not a problem, you can pick those off if they do transfer to the bowl. I normally fold it over so that none of those exposed cut areas are visible, so then you have less of an issue. And I'm just going to let this cool for just a second. It's going to be very hot, you do need to mind your fingers. There's no problem with wearing gloves. I tend not to, only because you can get a little bit more of a feel for the detail if you're just using your hand. And what I'll do, I think we'll start on the inside of the bowl because it's the easiest bit to do, and you just want to dip just a corner of your material in there. You can see that on there, and that's already starting to solidify now it's out in the open air. If I'll put a little bit more on there, I think. And you just want to just gently but generously, should I say, just wipe it around. Now you want to make sure that you're only putting a thin layer on. If you put it on too thickly, it just means you've got a lot more work later on buffing it out, because although this is a nice finish in its own right, and you can leave it as it is to have sort of a matte finish on there, I prefer a little bit more of sort of a high gloss. So what I'll generally do is apply a fairly thin layer like this, and then I'll buff it off later on with another cloth, and that will just allow you to get a nice sort of high sheen on there, which personally for this kind of woodwork I think looks very nice. It's entirely up to you how you want to do it. And again, you want to make sure you get into all your little nooks and crannies here. You will get some residue building up on there, it's not a problem, it's very easily taken off later on. And again, I've made quite a large amount of this in this tin, and something that some of my subscribers mentioned last time I did an oil finish video, which was a very good idea, which is why I'm now using it today, is if you can find yourself a small container, and something like a used tuna tin like this is ideal, you can make up your batch of oil, and when you're finished you can just leave it as it is, allow it to solidify into a mass, and then next time you want to use it, you just hold it over the heat for a couple of minutes. It will melt back down and you're ready to go again. So that's about it for this, guys. This is now coated. I'm going to give this probably another 10 minutes or so just to set, because you want this to sort of solidify on there before you start trying to buff it out. But already it's got a really nice look to it, and as I say, I'll come back in a short while once this is solidified and we'll move on to the buffing out. So the wax has now set. As you can see, it's got quite a sort of a matte looking finish. I realise there's a bit of glare coming off there, but it's more of a matte finish than it is a shine. And essentially all you want to do now is to take another piece of that same cloth, you know, nice lint free, clean cloth. Clean is very important. And the feel of this right now is it's very sticky. There's a lot of residue. If I run my thumb over it, I get some sort of sticky residue on my thumb, and that's what we're looking to get rid of. And really it's as simple as, let me just take a piece of this, don't ruin my shorts. And essentially what you're looking to do is just buff this off. Now I prefer to do it by hand. You could do it with a sort of a buffing wheel or something like that. But what you're trying to do is just take that residue off, and straight away I'm now running my hand over this, and it's got a very sort of smooth, shiny feel to it, but I'm not getting any of that residue on my hand. Now I won't bore you with the rest of this, guys, because it's pretty much of the same as I go along. So I'll finish this buffing off, I'll come back and I'll show you the final product. Right then, guys, well here we go, we are finished. It's been a little bit of a hard graft process at times, but I'm really pleased with this. As I said earlier on, I think at the start of the series, this is actually going to be a gift, so I'm really pleased with the way this has come out. I mean, I've buffed off all of the beeswax now, so it doesn't matter where I kind of run my fingers, it feels very smooth, very, you know, if you can say that if something feels shiny, that's how it feels. But again, you know, I'm really pleased with how this has come out. You know, a lot of the tool marks, you know, especially the ones inside the bowl, have kind of been hidden by the finish a little bit, which is really nice. And obviously it's darkened up a little bit since we applied the oil, which any type of woodwork will do. But you know, this, I'm really pleased with how it's come out. And again, I particularly chose almond oil because it's a light oil. For other things I would normally use walnut, but walnut oil does darken wood even more so than this. But anyway, guys, I'm really pleased with how this come out. We're really interested to hear your thoughts and your comments, and let me know what you think, especially if anybody's sort of tried doing something like this themselves. But all in all, I'm really hoping this goes down well. As I say, I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. So I hope it was useful, guys. You know, been through a few different techniques to get this made, and I hope at least some of it has been of use to you. And I'm just going to have a think now about what to try and make for you next. But anyway, as usual, guys, comments and questions in the box below. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I hope you'll all join me next time. Thanks, guys.